Welcome to episode 266 of Fires on the Farm. I'm Donovan. With me is Roy, and we are joined with Clark Fahrenthold, the new writer for MadFriars, a new inductee to the MadFriars portfolio, quiver, whatever you want to call it. Welcome to the show, dude.
Hey, appreciate it, guys. I'm really excited to be here. It should be fun to talk through some prospects, give you my thoughts on kind of a breakdown of where I put certain guys. So I'm looking forward to it. Really appreciate you guys having me on.
You know, I really, for me, I want to be able to tweet so much better than I do, and I don't. And you come on the scene in the past maybe 6 months, maybe a year, and you're right. You know, I've had a Fangraphs subscription for a couple of years now. I have no idea how to use it, and you're like, oh, his barrel rate's this, and his swing rate's that. I'm like, who is this guy?
No, I mean, I think there is. It's funny enough. When I first started off putting things out there, I would actually say the biggest critique of anything was my mom. I'm sure people maybe can sympathize in life, mom being the critiquer. But she was like, hey, these numbers are cool. But she's like, if you don't put it in a short form that's interesting, like no one's really going to care. So I think, being able to kind of fine tune, find that niche where it's, the numbers are interesting and they give context, but it's not too overwhelming and sort of a short form has been a bit of a feel out and challenge, but it's something that I've found a little bit of a sweet spot in. So it's been cool. It's been a lot of fun.
So this is kind of your formal introduction to everybody in person off of Twitter.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, how you got interested in, I mean, it seems like you're pursuing some sort of a journalism adjacent career. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a San Diego kid. I was born in San Diego. My father was military. He was a helicopter pilot for the better part of 20 years. So we bounced around a little bit early in my life. We lived in, Monterey for a while. We lived in Detroit, Michigan for a little bit. We lived in Pax River, Maryland. I think, my family had said I lived in about 7 houses by the time I was 8 years old. We were moving around so much. But third grade, finally settled down here in San Diego, did my high school all the way through, went to college at Sonoma State. And the journalism thing was just something I kind of, always in the back of my head wanted to pursue. My mom being a photographer for the Associated Press here in San Diego, being someone who took photos on the sidelines at Qualcomm Stadium. I got some cool photos of Junior Seau, sacking John Elway, seeing stuff like that, I think was, I guess you could say not in the bloodline, but definitely something to look at and be like, that's a really cool field and want to break into. So after college, graduating the pandemic, I sort of was, I'd worked at my college paper for 3 years and being the sports section and editor for one of them. I was like, hey, I want to kind of give this a go. And I was fortunate enough during that time to find a couple of publications that liked my work, brought me on. For one of them, I'm now the full-time sports section editor for them. And then I've been lucky enough here recently to do some work with the San Diego Union Tribune and a couple other publications locally here in San Diego covering sports wherever they need me. And then obviously MadFriars, gave me a little call and I was more than happy to join up with them. I've, liked watching your guys' show. I've known their work for a long time and it's something I'm super excited for, and covering prospects. It's a lot of fun. So it lines up pretty well with a lot of my interests. So it should be a pretty fun year moving forward.
You mentioned the Associated Press. I want to give a shout out to Bernie Wilson, who just retired after a 40-year career, and what a life he's lived, all the stories he's got to tell. So kudos to Bernie Wilson.
Yeah, definitely. So funny enough with Bernie, one of the first big events that I worked in San Diego was the Carrier Classic. I want to say in 2023, back when I forget it was Gonzaga versus Michigan State. And my mom, before I went there, because she had worked with Bernie Wilson, she'd done a couple of assignments with him. It was like, hey, if you see Bernie or whatever, make sure to, say hi to him, whatever. And after the game, I spotted him, shook his hand, could not have been a nicer guy. I think one of the nicer people I think you'll meet in the world of journalism, super, open to talk about anything. So to see him sort of ride off in the sunset now is sad because I've followed his work for so long, but again, couldn't have been a better journalist, couldn't have been a better guy. So 40 years, definitely a very unbelievable career.
You guys watched a lot of bad sports, man.
Yeah.
Poor guys. It's funny because I've met him up a couple of times in the not I wasn't in the press box, but he's in the press box, and I'm looking up talking to him. He's like, he's not afraid to speak his mind in the press box. So it was real fun to the curmudgeon guy who just he cuts through the bull crap, with everything. but we're here to talk about your top 30. But first, let's just kind of spitball a little bit of the Rokas Sasaki situation. The look and feel of it is no one knows anything. Everyone's speculating, and most of these people that are tweeting stuff may have a source and may not have a source, but it's just kind of like blind copium and manifesting this.
Yeah, I think it's always sort of funny to me when these situations pop up. It's like, wow, there's never been more people with more sources that I've ever seen in my entire life. Right. These big name guys start showing up. It's so interesting. But, I think this is one of the more recent signings or feelings where I feel like no one really has that great of a pulse. Again, he's kept it so secret and secluded, Sasaki and his camp, throughout the whole process, being very adamant about not wanting leaks and different things where, if the Padres do get him, will I be shocked? No. If the Dodgers, it's sort of one of those things where it's like, you don't really know because everything's so light, tightly locked in right now. But I'm optimistic San Diego is a good shot. I think if Preller pulls this off, man, that would be something special for him considering things that are going on right now. But, I still feel pretty good about it. I think if it was very heavily Dodgers leaning, I feel like it would be a little more evident at this point. But I still think it's pretty 50-50, maybe 55, 45, if you want to call it that or something. But yes, pretty close.
I feel like he would have more impact on the Padres than pretty much any other team in the majors.
Yeah.
But my coping mechanism is that I've convinced myself that it's not going to happen. Yeah. So that if it happens, I'm pleasantly surprised because we've been let down so many times by convincing ourselves that guy's going to come, and it doesn't happen. And Ohtani, everybody thought that Preller had the inside track on Ohtani. Same kind of thing.
No, I mean, I think with Sasaki, if San Diego does get him, because obviously the price point that he's going to come in, I think it's fair to say that it's a franchise-altering sort of signing. I mean, you're getting control, at face value, elite pitcher. We're talking about a guy who can, run it up to 101. The fastball shape was a little bit better prior to last season. I mean, the splitter is absolutely disgusting. The slider keeps coming along. You throw that into a rotation with, it appears like they're going to keep Cease now with Michael King. I mean, it only makes you that much more dangerous. And the fact that you not only have him for an extended period of time, but for such little money is so big for the organization. So big.
Now, you mentioned Michael King and Donovan. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, but they're going into arbitration with him. And this is the first time in Preller's tenure that they're going into arbitration with a player. I know that those hearings can get pretty salty. The team's job is to show how the player has less value. I hope that doesn't sour any kind of a relationship. And I hope that also doesn't mean that he might be a potential trade candidate because he was so good last year. And he really he seemed to enjoy playing here.
Absolutely.
I feel that, they're just probably going to meet in the middle somewhere and Preller can just get it done.
They can't meet in the middle though. I mean, I guess they could settle like what the Cubs did with Tucker, but I mean, you've got this number and that number, and the arbiter has to choose which one. There's no middle ground here.
There's no right. The negotiating is over.
Yeah. And it's a weird situation because for the first 4.5 years of his major league career, he struggled. And then finally the last year and a half, he looks elite. So is that value based on the last year and a half or the 4.5 years that preceded? It's an interesting case.
No, I mean, again, and especially if I agree, because if you look at from May on, I mean, there's a compelling case that you could say he was maybe the second or third pitcher in the National League, probably a top 5 arm in baseball. He's a 4.5 F4 guy, 28.5% K percentage. I wanted to say it was around a 2.56 FIP. Those are all top 10 in baseball in those respective spots. And I know the second outing against the Dodgers, there's obviously the home run against Teoscar Hernandez, but in the wild card series, that looked like a guy that can win a Cy Young. All that stuff when he's on is so nasty. And, it's going to be interesting, especially as the first guy ever going to arbitration with Preller. It'll be interesting to see how they kind of all handle it. But he's someone you really got to hope, especially to you can extend, because he's legit ace in my eyes.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's get into it. Let's start with your top 30. First, let's talk about your, in your article here, you say that you don't really go the normal way about ranking players, about ceiling. Yeah. You look more depth in the numbers. Kind of give us an explanation of your God, I can't remember the word right now.
Yeah, so the methodology, I guess you could say, what
That's what I was
my
looking
idea of
for.
going through it. So I like one thing I want to say is I do think performance in season is important. You obviously don't want a guy to go out there and just stink up the joint and have a sub 600 OPS and not look completely lost. I do think on-field performance is important. That said, for myself and my evaluation process, I'm someone who values maybe stuff and a ceiling, like what I feel like they could maximize out to be in the long term, to be a little bit more top of my list. Like, I think if you see someone, for example, like, let me go through and think. Like with DeVries, like early on, you saw some guys, he was out there, he was struggling for a little bit, and people were like, oh, should he be here? And in my eyes, it was always like, hey, what the ceiling is with this kid. He's a 5-tool player, and he slowly started to come around. Same thing. A really good example would be a guy like Brandon Niet. Like, I'm super high on Niet because, okay, the walk rate's a problem. Sure, he needs to continue to come down on that. But you're also looking at a guy who I think when you look at his 3-pitch mix, a fastball slider with a continuing, developing changeup and everything, that's an arsenal that I feel like can play at the major league level. Like when you're throwing 97 miles an hour plus and you're having upwards, 16, 17 inches of induced vertical break averagely on your fastball, that's going to play. So if you struggle with walks and command a little bit more, but the raw stuff, I feel like I can see it in extended sparks, I'm probably going to favor him over like a guy, maybe say, I know I put Baez ahead. Maybe that's not the best example, but someone like, let me go through, trying to think of a name off the top of my head who I'm like, you're like over a Burger. Like I like Ryan Burger
Right.
too, but yeah, like some over like that, I would say.
Or a Kohler, a little bit older guy.
Yeah. So, I think that's kind of the methodology. It's where, results are important, but they're not everything. It's the stuff and where I feel like, if they're at their peak, this is where I feel like they can play at.
So then how do you mix in guys like Cash Mayfield, Humberto Cruz, Boston Bateman, who you've got ahead of Braden Net, and some of these other guys you've already mentioned, who haven't thrown pitch as a pro, in an affiliated game. All we've got is backlots data.
Yeah, so
data.
That's a great question. I think for those guys with Mayfield, with a guy like Bateman, with a guy like Cruz, it's projectability. It's what I see when I turn on the film from high school. And it's like, right, with Mayfield, I had him at 4. I know he needs that third pitch, but the fastball, the extension he gets on it, the ride that it has, I think it's a really solid pitch. Bateman, same thing. He's got a good secondary with the curveball. The fastball shows a lot of life. I think when you look at them, it's like, all right, this is what their baseline is right now. If they continue to refine, like with Bateman, refine the mechanics, find a little bit more of the zone, get that third pitch, I think that ceiling can be a little bit higher. They're also younger. I think that plays into it. There's a lot more time to grow. There's more time and development available in there. So I think that's really why I would have them right now ahead of a guy like Niet, for example. And then Cruz, another, again, guy who's younger, but I look at Cruz and, you hear the stuff out of the back lots around 2,500 RPM, spinning on the slider. He came in throwing 92, 93. Now he's throwing 97. And the biggest thing with a guy like Cruz is when I look at him, it's not only that he has 3 pitches, it's not only the stuff is getting better, he peppers the zone. He's a strike thrower. He's someone who, and I think for teenagers, especially as pitching prospects, finding command can be the most difficult thing. And the fact that he's already got a really good grasp of the zone and already has 3 pitches that he has a good feel for and look projectable is why he's so tantalizing to me, why I feel like he could be a legitimate arm in this team and in this system.
It's funny. We always preach on here. We don't stat the scout. We don't scout the stat line.
Yeah.
And that definitely goes with Leo here. I watched almost every game that he played this year, and just the at bats weren't coming, but the glove was there. And you see him in person and you watch his body language, you watch him go about the game, and there's nothing changes. You don't see him grab the bat and kind of go away. You don't see it. He's trusting the process. And I when I talked to him with the fall, he talked about that. Like, I just had to get used to the league. Like, this is the first time this kid's seeing anything other than academy ball or even complex ball where you don't know where the pitch is coming. These guys are a little bit more advanced, and he's still super young. It took him a while to kind of get used to it, but he was starting to barrel up some of the curveballs.
Yeah, I mean, again, when it got to like early on, I think you just saw a kid that was 17 years old that, as you pointed out, was seeing something different from complex or, sort of level ball, and really got his first taste of professional baseball. And it took a little bit of adjustment, but I don't think at any point during that struggle until he caught fire in July, which I think, I want to say he had like over a 150 WRC plus. He was walking, he was hitting homers left and right. Obviously, he had the shoulder injury there towards the end of the year. But the thing that always comes out with me with him is like the supreme confidence that he has in himself. I think when you would watch some of his approaches at the plate, there'd be long 9-10 pitch at bats where he's taking balls that are like 50-50, but he's taking them and he's spitting on them, no problem. And then, again, these guys are older that he's thrown to, and he's turning on fastballs inside with relative ease. He's flashing the power big time from both sides of the box. And I just think the early feel for the strike zone combined with like his barrel speed, his hand speed, all of that at the plate is just exactly what you would want for a guy that you spent that money for. And how young he is, like the sky is the limit for a guy like DeVries in my mind.
All right, so then let's move on to number 2. The boy, the Wunderkind, Ethan Salas. Now, I couldn't imagine, for me, watching a lot of him this, in Elsinore, and then watching him this last year in Fort Wayne, then getting to see him again in the fall league. Like, I couldn't believe he got better, but he's actually better in the fall league. And it's like already in a super elite glove. But just the sky's the limit for this kid.
No, and I think from like a positional value standpoint, I think catcher, if you have a really good catcher, it's very noticeable at the big league level. Like there would have been an argument in my mind, like, hey, if you want to put him at 1, I get it. I think the upside's still there. And I know it was a struggle offensively this year. I think maybe there's something to be learned from San Diego, being just a little more patient with their young guy. Hopefully they kind of learn that lesson with DeVries. Don't push him too fast. But I think when he came back from the All-Star break, there were some noticeable swing changes that he made. He was more athletic in his lower half. I think he talked about that he wasn't trying to lift, like his fly ball rate was through the roof in those early months. He was trying to put everything in the air, but he decided to start swinging down to the ball a little bit more. He started to use his leverage a little bit better, and the results immediately started to come, especially there towards later in the season. And I, in my opinion, and I think like you guys saw at the Arizona Fall League, that carried over. The adjustments that he made there were noticeable. And I think that AFL end of the year is huge for him going into this year, because I think it gave him a ton of confidence. Yeah. And I think one thing too that, and the reason I've remained high on Salas, like I haven't even touched on the defensive skill, I will in a sec, but one thing he never lost was, like DeVries, the insane advanced plate discipline. Like he had maintained a walk rate of over 10%. He wasn't chasing still, even when he was struggling, with a lot of guys do, especially when they're young, to try to get up a slump. He wasn't chasing at a very high rate. I think he stayed below, 25% during that time. His end zone contact rate was above 80 for most of the year. So he's a guy who knows exactly what the pitch is supposed to be and which ones to swing at. And then on the defensive side, you won't find a better defensive prospect in baseball. His receiving is insane. He has such a good feel back there. From everything I heard about his ability to call and command a game and interact with pitchers, it's well beyond his years. And I thought, which was really interesting, is that same thing, second half, his caught stealing number went way up. And he talked about himself that, he chased pop times early on in his career. Like that elusive number, like, oh, I want to keep lowering it. But he worked with the Padres catching coach, minor league catching coach. And he was like, hey, just fire it to the back. Don't think about pop times, deliver a good throw on target. And I think he ended up finishing with like a 27.7% caught stealing rate. And that was just from him making tiny little adjustments and just working through things. So again, I think he'll have a big bounce back year. I think the AFL was big for him, and he's still a guy I'm really high on. And there's plenty to still like with Salas's game. I think people were, as you pointed out, you don't scout the stat lines. Like when I saw the screenshots, people were like, oh, he's hitting 186. I'm like, watch the games. Like, I know it's a struggle. Watch the games. There's still so much to love about his game.
Well, the first month in Fort Wayne is brutal. Nobody gets off to a good start in that place.
Yeah.
So you've thrown out numbers. I want to know what kind of references you use. I mean, we all have access to Fangraphs, but are there any other places where you find the spin rate data, extension data? You mentioned contact rate changing throughout the season. Is that something you just kind of watch, or do you have some other resources?
So a really good resource to have is TJ Stats on Twitter. He does a great job of going through and scraping data and compiling on his Patreon. I pay for that because I think really gives you an advanced look at some of these guys' numbers and kind of gives you a feel for the underlying data. Fangraphs, I always think, has a really good spot to go through and reference for certain things. Obviously, it's a little bit more baseline, but TJ Stats is great. Then I do a good bulk of just keeping track of stuff on my own. Like, for guys, I'll keep track, the whiff rates and different things throughout the course of the season, kind of make sure I'm tracking, seeing dips and stuff like that. But yeah, for those contact rates, in zone, chase rates, TJ Stats that he has online, you can find on his Patreon. Really a good place to kind of just get an extra look at some of those things beyond some of the regular box scores you see from some minor league, either affiliates or what you see on Fangraphs or wherever you find your normal day-to-day stats.
Yeah, it seems like every time one of these guys pops up, they either get snatched up by like Baseball Prospectus,
yes, they do,
or they get hired by a team to be part of their brain trust.
Exactly. I agree. Like I'm sure maybe someone else has reached out to him, but yeah, these guys get scooped up by, Fangraphs, Baseball Perspective, someone else, Baseball America. They snatch him up real quick. But no, he does great work, and that's sort of where I go for some of my stuff on that.
Okay.
With Salas, one of the things I really like about him, and I watched it in the fall league, is he's not afraid to go out to the mound. Like, nope. One of the things I remember during the World Series, during that horrible inning, the Dodgers scored 5 runs. No one went out to the mound. Catcher didn't go out to the mound. The pitching coach didn't go out to the mound. They just kind of left the guy out there. Never gave him a chance to breathe. Salas sees something, he gets out there. And it's just an Arizona Fall League game, but having that confidence to be able to go out to a pitcher that you may not even know that well, and say, hey, just to give him a breather, I think shows a level of maturity as a catcher that's huge.
Yeah, and I think one thing that to me was really interesting is that when I got a chance to talk to Brendan Durfee, before I talked to Salas at the Arizona Fall League. And I asked him about his development on the defensive side. I mean, Brendan obviously graduated from college, good catcher at UCSB. He said, it's been great to be here with Ethan because I've learned a ton from him too. So if a college guy who's been through a college system is soaked up knowledge from the 18, 19-year-old, I think that tells you how knowledgeable and how good of a feel he has back there.
All right. So the next couple of guys on your list here are a couple of pitchers that you already mentioned.
Yeah.
Boston Bateman and Cash Mayfield.
Yeah.
Why pick one over the other? Or were they kind of like what, 6A and
1A, 1B?
Wait,
I think
4A and 4B, I mean.
I think for me, I liked Mayfield a little bit more because I like the fastball profile a little bit better. I think he has a little bit more of a feel for a third pitch already. Again, not to where it needs to be, but he has a solid feel for it. And I know he's 19, so he's a little bit older, but he has better command feel. Again, that breaking ball that spins in the high 70s. It's a little bit loopy, but I still feel like it's something that with time, it can spin a little bit tighter, help him out a little bit more. But I feel like the big thing was fastball shape, and I think Mayfield has a better feel and command for the zone. Bateman, for a 6'8" guy, there's a reason they call him Sasquatch. He's an athletic dude up there. Do not get that wrong. I think he has a motion in my eyes that look a little bit like Josh Hader with a turn of the back. Maybe it's the long hair too that kind of flows with it. But I think with some refinement there, I really like the curveball that he has, and I do like the fastball. But I just feel like Mayfield's a little bit further ahead. I think maybe long-term he profiles just a touch better, but I don't think there was a huge gap in between the two. If Bateman has a better year this year, I mean, it wouldn't shock me, but I think they're two guys that are certainly intriguing arms for sure. But they're both people who I feel like need a third pitch. But again, I think the biggest thing for Mayfield, 97, I like the run on it a little bit more. I like the command he had a little bit more. And I think it's just a little bit more refined on his end with Mayfield at the moment.
Well, the size with Mayfield, I could see how. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse. You've got easy power at 6'8", but then you've got all these long levers, and how do you keep all that moving in the same direction?
No, I agree. And again, I think Bateman's obviously a great prospect. I mean, if LSU's calling your name and giving you a full ride scholarship, that's not nothing. So these guys are two dudes I think San Diego should expect to obviously be contributors down the line and should profile out pretty well.
During the Bridge League, I don't know if you follow him, but Jerry Espinoza, he's a photographer out there, and he's a great follow and has really good insight on all the players. And he was talking about Cruz just going he was just lighting guys up. Yeah. And same thing with Bateman and Mayfield. He's like, I really like these guys, and a little bit of explanation of what they were doing, but kind of hearing it from that guy, it kind of gave us some hope there. It kind of gave us some eyes on those three guys.
Definitely.
Moving down to Henry Baez. It's funny.
Yeah.
I was just looking through some photographs and just kind of clearing on my computer, and I found some pictures I took of him back when he was in Lake Elsinore.
Mhm.
I like Baez. He's got a lot of projectability. I think the fastball's there. He's upper 90s, yeah, with the fastball.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the thing that I will say that I like about his fastball is that it's added a tick every year for the past 3 seasons. It's a pitch that seems like it hasn't quite hit its ceiling yet. He'll sit anywhere from what I remember in San Antonio, 93 to 94, get it up there, but he can hit 97 if he wants it. The big thing that I liked with him, I think the numbers were good: 2.99 ERA, 3.85 FIP. He got a lot of guys to beat the ball on the ground. I know San Antonio is a place that's a little more pitcher friendly, but if you're getting a 57% ground ball rate, you're doing something right. And again, I think one thing for him maybe to work on just moving forward. Again, I like the spinner, the slider that he's got, spins high 70s, doesn't get a ton of whiffs. It's just sometimes he has a tendency to, like, he can throw for strikes, which is great, but sometimes he's had a little bit of trouble leaving it up in the zone. I think he had like a 16% home run to fly ball ratio. I think it was a good spark off of that pitch, but mechanics are simple. They're repeatable. I think his floor is high. I think he's someone who, if San Diego needed an arm this year, I don't think I'd be like, oh my gosh, we're calling up Baez, he's not ready. I feel like he's pretty stout and ready to go. And I think the pitches and repertoire and the ability to command the zone give him that high floor that should be able to make him a solid back end rotation piece. So, I mean,
that kind of refinement's what they work on in Double A.
No, exactly. I mean, again, he's not going to be one of these dudes who's a whiff machine, but when your guys are hitting you in zone around 85% and you're getting him to ground the ball over, that does a job. Like, I know strikeouts are sexy, but getting outs are really cool too. And he does a great job with
that. We just talked to Pete Zamora, and we've talked to a lot of these pitchers, and they echo that kind of sentiment that they're told to fill the zone. You got to be in the zone. If you're not filling up the zone, you're not going to go anywhere. And it doesn't seem like the coaching staff is really harping on strikeouts. It's outs. How are you making outs?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how you're making the outs. It's that you're generating them. You're not giving away the free walks. You're not loading up the bases before that big hit. The big hit happens as long as there's not two guys in front of them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, Baez does a really good job at that. And I think there's something to be said for a style of pitching, which is, again, 97 is something to scoff at when you can get it up to, but when you can consistently find the zone and you can be effective in the zone with multiple pitches, that's someone who can contribute to your ball club. That's not something just to throw away and ignore because it's not, oh, well, it doesn't have great, vertical run or glove side action. No, he's a good pitcher. He's someone who can contribute definitely for this team. And like I said, if he got called on, I would have pretty good confidence that he'd be able to go out there and get outs.
Well, moving right along, we talked to Brandon Nett a long time ago, and it's funny how he was so raw last year, the year before, that he's just shot up after the Arizona Fall League last year. He just shot up this season, and he's on everyone's radar now.
No, he is like, I don't want to say my darling of everyone in the system, but man, do I love to watch him pitch. Yeah. I think he goes out there with a ton of confidence. I love when he feels comfortable to throw the fastball, whenever it counts. That slider, I feel like, took a big step forward. I feel like he's throwing it more for strikes now. Has great action through the zone, really good horizontal movement to it. And with the fastball being so explosive, and like I said, having 16 to 17 inches of induced vertical break on there where it's climbing in on guys, he's sort of like that wiry build with everything, but everything comes out of his hand so dang explosive. And I feel like the mechanics got a little bit more refined. I know the walk rate was still high, but he took a step forward and he lowered it from last season to where it is now. And he's someone who can just get swings out of the zone, and he can make guys look just stupid all the time if he wants to. And so I think he's one of recent years, I would say, one of the best jobs the Padres have done in scouting. I mean, this guy was undrafted. I mean, you guys obviously know that, but he's came out of nowhere. And now he's a 22-year-old who's, in my opinion, one of the best starting arms in this system, and someone who I feel like, the upside is certainly there. I feel like, I think I said it, at the start of the show, that what he has with this slider, what he has with this fastball, what he has with the changeup, it's all there. It's just a matter of, putting things together and finding a little more consistency in the zone. So, and he's also he's adding a curveball to the mix too. That thing's sitting in the mid 70s. It's got good 1 to 7 movement on it. I mean, he adds a fourth pitch to it. It gets even that much more deadly. And, I know he made one brief appearance in San Antonio, one start towards the end of the season, but I mean, he had some walks in there, but you saw again, like he's going to play. I'm really excited to watch him have a full year in that park. I'm sure the numbers will be really good just because, it's just like we said, it's a pitcher friendly park. And I think I want to say with his slider, just to go back to that, I think he had a 38% swing and miss rate on that pitch this year. Like he's getting guys that miss that thing like crazy. It's got great depth, everything that you would want, I think, theoretically in a projectable arm. Net has. He's a killer. I love watching him pitch.
As nasty as he is and fastball slider, I wonder if I just pulled it up and it looks like he's been a starter exclusively. Only a couple of relief appearances. I wonder if they might think about converting him just to get him up a little bit. If he shows that he's ready, but there's no room for him.
Yeah, I mean, there could obviously be a possibility. I mean, San Diego has certainly a knack for making guys if they wanted to transition him to a reliever and then at some point back to a starter. Sure, because again, the high end stuff's there, and I mean, he's a 5 mix guy because he's got a cutter in there too that plays well. So if they wanted to do that at some point in the year, I could see it. Obviously, it depends on how things go this season in San Antonio. But again, he's someone who I'm extremely high on, and I'm glad people are starting to catch on to what he's done because I feel like the body of work is deserving of that sort of recognition. So especially a cool story to be someone who's undrafted and make it to this point. I know he's not here yet, but to the major league level. But man, to come up from where that was being undrafted, it's pretty dang cool to watch.
Juco Bandit.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Well, and he comes from a small town. Like I remember talking to his mom. He's like, "There's like 10 people in my town, and it's just in the middle of nowhere." He lives on a farm somewhere. Next up here is someone we've followed for a very long time.
Yeah,
got in a little trouble texting him, reaching out to him when he first got drafted. And that's Jagger Haynes. I think for me this year, we really got to see what the ceiling that he has there. And some of the development that really needs to happen. I'd like to use this from Zamo, use this when he talked about Luis Patino. He's the baby rattlesnake. He has all this venom, but he doesn't know exactly when to do it. And lowering that heartbeat, lowering the mindset to where you can just throw away a bad inning or a bad at bat. And be able to come back, I think is really huge for him.
Yeah, I think coming off another year fully removed from Tommy John, I think coming back from that and having just sort of fully another established year, I think will be helpful for him. I think you saw a glimpse of dominance, especially from like May 1st to August. During that time, he had like a 3.64 ERA. I think he had a K percent north of 25%. That was some of the best you'd seen Jagger Hayes look all season. And again, he's someone who I think, again, moving away from the injury, the fastball sits 93 to 95. He's gotten up to 97. I think it topped out around 17 or 18 inches of induced vertical break. And coming from a left-hander, that's really good. And I think you saw too, maybe his most impressive pitch be that curveball that he has. He's got really good feel for it. Not only can throw it in the zone, but I remember it was against Max Clark when they were playing them. He struck him out twice with that pitch. He made him look, he threw him a locker twice for that pitch. And that's a guy who's a top 10 prospect. So I think he's someone who I really like. I think, again, the stuff is there. He mixes in a changeup too. That thing's got a good, around 18 inches of horizontal break. It's another 3-pitch mix that I feel like really plays at can right now and continue to play up to a major league level. Again, command is something he needs to improve on.
Yeah.
I think, that comes with the territory with a lot of these young guys, but I think he's sort of entering much closer to that frame that San Diego thought he was going to be when they offered him that $300,000 signing bonus in that 5th round. So lean, athletic, solid extension off the mound. He's someone who I really like for sure.
I really liked, there's a lot of talent in the Midwest League this year from other teams.
I don't think there'll be a more fun team to watch on another portion of the season than Fort Wayne. I think Fort Wayne will be a blast this year, especially if they decide to start Salas there. I think DeVries will be there. I think you'll see a couple of these arms will be there. But man, Midwest, San Antonio should be the same thing. A lot of cool pitchers up there, and that it should be a fun year to watch for the minors for sure.
All right, we'll move on to our next guy, another friend of the podcast, Isaiah Lowe. I love talking to this kid. I had to turn up the mic, and then then, Roy had to turn up his volume because he just talks so low, and it was just kind of just confident. But the low heartbeat with this kid, I think is really going to make him go far.
Yeah, I had an opportunity to talk to Isaiah last year before the start of the season. I think his initial showing in 2023, where he looked really dominant before that shoulder injury, gave me a lot of hope for what he could be. Because again, he was sort of an unknown. He was, I believe, a Wake Forest commit. San Diego paid above slot, and he sparked right away. But then he has a shoulder injury, and I thought the big thing for him, he was my guy who I said breakout candidate. That's who I said last year. He was my guy to go out there and do it. And the big thing for him was just staying healthy. And man, he was unbelievable in the Cal League when he was out there for Lake Elsinore. I think one thing when you see him, he's not small. I shouldn't say shorter wise. He's about 6'6", but man, does he have some big legs, some like Earl Campbell legs, and he's got some big old shoulders, and those arms are a lot longer than you would think. And I think that's something that really helps his fastball, because his fastball sits 93, 97, but he's got really good extension from those long arms and those powerful legs, so it can get up there to 97. And I think it plays faster because of that. And not only with that, with the fastball being as good as it is, the slider is the pitch. I mean, he had a 44% swing and miss rate on that pitch between single A and high in Fort Wayne. And that's ridiculously good. The big thing Lowe has to just focus on, I've been glad to see him toying with a cutter this year, because I think that'll help bridge the gap to his fastball, is just get a little bit better of a feel on that changeup. I think you saw it in Fort Wayne a little bit when he got bumped up. Guys sort of started sitting pitches because they knew he only had feel for two of them. So there's a lot of early swings on him. And he still has some solid success. He was still getting guys to swing and miss at pitches, but the development of that third pitch and getting that cutter to kind of be in there, I think not only raises his ceiling, but makes his arsenal as a whole that much more deadly. And I think, to your point, when I talk to him there, again, he's a soft-spoken kid, could not be a nicer guy. But what I love, too, is when he's out on the mound, like, you guys remember that play? I think it was his first start for Fort Wayne. He makes that diving play, tags a guy out at home and gets up, just huge, like fist pump. Like, just a great competitor, but so even-keeled at the same time. So he's someone who I was super glad to see have a lot of success. He could be someone who's a back-end rotation piece. It all just depends on how the arsenal continues to progress moving forward. But he's someone who I really like, and I think last year was really important for him to get things back right on track after the injury to end 2023.
All right. Well, I want to skip ahead a little bit. So you've got Tavares Tiers next at number 10. Draftee out of college. And I'm surprised to see Tyson Neighbors and Cale Fountain both down at 16 and 17, guys that I expect to see up closer to the number 10 on other guys' lists. What's your reasoning for where you slotted all three of those guys?
Yeah.
What do you like so much about Tiers?
Yeah. So with Tiers, I think it's more of the fact I was able to watch him a lot, obviously in Knoxville as a Tennessee Volunteer. I was really impressed, especially when I saw at the College World Series. I think it was important for him. He's someone who mashes fastballs. I think against pitches 92 or higher collegiately, he had like over an 85% hard hit rate. He really handled that well. I think there's still some swing and miss in his game, obviously, with other pitches. I just think because I know a little bit more about him right now, I know what I'm getting. I think that's why I have him a little bit higher. If I'm going to be completely honest, I wanted to put guys like Fountain and Hightower a little bit higher on this list, but with not being able to see anything else on them except for the bits and pieces of perfect game highlights or high school tape, it's sort of a limited knowledge on that. But with Tiers, it's like, all right, I watched this guy again. First 2 years, didn't play a lot in Tennessee, jumped on the scene in year 3. I think a superb athlete. I know in center, I don't know if he'll stay in center field or if we're moving one of the corners, but he doesn't have like an elite first step. But I think, that's okay because the closing speed, once he gets going, is so good that defensively he'll be fine wherever you put him. I think, first steps, some people say it's the end all be all. I don't think it is. I think if you're a fast guy, you make up it more on the top end of speed. And I think that's something that Tiers does really well. He's someone who I think he makes good swing decisions in the zone, even though the strikeout rate was a little bit higher, but he still walked at a solid amount from what I recall. But I think it's more so, if I were to give an answer as to why he's there, it's just because I saw the body of work a little bit more in Fountain and Hightower, even though, again, I'm probably higher on them in my head than I am where I put them. It's just I haven't had an opportunity to see them yet.
I'm excited to see Cale Fountain. The guy's 6'5", playing third base. I'm curious how he's going to shake out.
I agree. I think Cale, first off, the Padres drafted some 80 great names this year. I mean, you could not have found a better draft class with better names. I think people have highlighted that well, but when you're getting high
Kavara's tears is
powers.
going to make you cry.
I know, exactly. It's like, how could you possibly pick up all of these in one round, But no, Fountain, again, the build is, he looks like a basketball player. He looks like he'd be playing tight end. He's still, I think that's the thing that impressed me more than anything else, is that sometimes those really big guys can be stiff at the plate, but he's fluid. He's got, the hand speed's really good. His bat stays in the zone a long time. He's got a good bat path. The swing is not too complex. It doesn't look forced. It's simple. It's smooth. And I think, too, when he was at the combine, I think he had the third highest top end exit velocities at like 103.65 was like his average or something, which with some guys out there like Slade Caldwell being, higher than them. I think that's really telling. And San Diego clearly has a really high opinion of this guy if you're going to give him a $1.7 million signing bonus and lure him away from LSU. I don't think he'll ultimately end up staying at third base. I don't think that's where he'll be. I mean, they'll probably give him a run there. But to me, he's someone who I feel like with the athleticism that he has, which is still good because he swiped north of 80 bases in college. I mean, that's pretty dang good for a guy who's 6'5" to go out there and swipe 80 bags. But I think he's someone who probably maybe ends up fitting more in the corner outfield if I were to judge. I think he's someone who could be a right fielder or left field because the athleticism's good, but always a bat player. And the power is insane. I mean, it's, in my opinion, 65, 70 grade power. Obviously, you have to see it play out in a game, but he's got some Herculean strength. And for them to lure him away from LSU, I think it tells you the opinion that the organization has on him. And I'm super excited for him.
I want to go back to Tears for a second. So you've watched him a fair amount. I'll admit I haven't seen him swing a bat yet.
Right.
I know that he's got a lot of power. I know he's crazy athletic. I've heard about that he crushes fastballs, and the knock on him is that people think he's going to struggle recognizing spin and making contact with it.
Yeah.
When I hear that profile, I tend to assume that the swing is a little bit longer. Do you think there's something in there in his mechanics that they might be able to simplify or shorten up a little bit with the strength that he has to be able to overcome that?
Yeah, I think honestly, from what I recall from watching Tears, his swing is not one that's like super long or, it just takes too long to get the bat around. I actually think he's relatively short to the baseball, kind of a little more compact. Maybe he could take out a little bit of the front leg. I think it's a little bit too, I think he has a little bit of a leg kick in there from time to time. But there's certainly things that they can iron out. Again, I think the swing and miss was there, certainly, obviously, with being able to have an issue to recognize off-speed pitches. But there are still times where he got to him. I think, again, once a guy gets in there, he gets a little more tutelage from the Padres hitting coaches and stuff. There are some things that they certainly can mainstream, finite, make a little bit tighter. But no, I think he's someone who certainly can adjust. I know, obviously, as you pointed out, when you hear the worry about, okay, can he hit sliders? Can he hit curveballs? You automatically think this is a guy who could hit 20 home runs, but he's going to strike out north of 35% of the time, which you don't really want. But I think he'll certainly be better than that in my eyes. I feel like he has the ceiling of a 4-tool player, maybe 5-tool. I mean, obviously that's a big thing to say, but the raw athleticism, the bat speed, the hand speed is crazy. It's what you would want in a center fielder and a star type outfielder. I think he's got, enough to be a high quality player.
So then the tool that you have a little bit of doubt on is the most important tool, the actual hit tool.
The actual hit tool, yes. I would say, because again, he hit what I want to say is like 324 in college. I mean, he had an OPS over 1,000. SEC baseballs, in my opinion, I think I think West Coast baseball is extremely good. A lot of too much bias for the SEC. But yeah, the pure contact skills, yeah, I do have a little bit of worry on. But, again, I think that's something that can be fine-tuned. I don't think he's ever going to be someone who, is like a Luis Ariz who goes out there and is just slapping balls the other way. But he's someone I think can make consistent enough contact through the zone and do enough damage on pitches that are left for mistakes that he can be someone who you in the future could see as a major league outfielder.
Yep. All righty, moving right along. I always get Baez and Francis Pena mixed up. I was thinking about Pena when I asked about Baez.
Yeah.
Pena is just, this kid has moved up so fast.
Yes.
I don't think he gets a shot next year, but I think maybe midseason, if they need somewhere into the bullpen and he's doing well, I think he might get a call later on in the season.
Yeah, I think Francis Payne is a guy I would expect to make a debut this season. I think the sinker, I guess, is really what you would quantify it as. I mean, it's 690, 698. 101 is what it can top out as. I think that 3/4 arm slot makes it only that much more deadly. Great extension off the mound. I think that's the thing. He's one of those guys, taller than the net, obviously, but he's lengthy. He's wiry. That thing comes in firing. And he has his secondary is like a cut. I guess it's a cutter. I mean, I guess you could qualify it as a slider if you want, but the cutter is ridiculous. Sits around like what, 91, 92. But again, it's so tight spinning. He can run it up to 97. And I think the biggest thing for him, there's a lot of good arms in this, San Diego system in the bullpen. You could say like a Bradley Rodriguez. I love Sean Reynolds, who's already made his major league debut. But the thing you don't have to worry about with him was the command was so good last season. I mean, he had a walk rate under 9%. He was not only punching guys out like crazy, but he wasn't walking anyone. And when you have an arsenal, that continues to develop, and you have almost 7 feet of an extension, it's a pretty much a game changer. And he's not only that, but I think he's starting to add a curveball in there. That's his next project. I want to say he's sitting around like 88 miles an hour, 90 miles an hour on that. So to me, he's someone who I think they should certainly give a shot to midseason. And I think he's someone probably by year's end, you could see working high leverage innings. I think his stuff is that good.
All right.
I don't know if you guys have quite as much faith as I do, but I think Pena's like, I buy Pena hard. I think it's hard not to. If you're throwing 101 mile an hour sinkers and it's moving about 11 to 12 inches on the horizontal break scale, good luck. That to me is going to play, especially if you're walking guys at such a low rate. I want to see him pretty quick. Obviously, the bullpen has to shake out. Decisions have to be made, but I'm pretty dang high on the guy.
Well, I mean, Jeremiah Estrada got that done last year. He came out of nowhere and became one of the high leverage relievers. So it's possible.
I mean, like as you pointed out, there's not a lot of guys that move up 3 levels in one season and coast at every level. And I think if you can pitch and strike guys out of the PCL, which he didn't maybe necessarily do at the highest capacity as he did in Fort Wayne or he did in San Antonio, but he was still doing it and having success. To me, that's like, all right, you got to be really dang good if you're getting guys out consistently in El Paso. Yeah. So I have a lot of hope for Pena as a guy. So moving forward for the Padres bullpen.
Well, hey man, we really appreciate you taking the time to come on here. It's great meeting you. But let's talk about one more guy that moved up every level and just kept hitting in every level. And that's friend of the podcast, Romeo Sanabria.
Yes.
Sanabria.
No, believe me, I hate to admit it, but I have probably butchered back and left and right on the name so many times, which I feel terrible. As someone who is also a difficult last name to pronounce, like I always want to make sure I get it right. So no, I sympathize with the mispronunciation.
But he just, every move along the way, he kept hitting. You're thinking, okay, he's going to pause here, or he's going to, go through a rough patch. He just kept hitting. The power's not there, and obviously he's a first baseman. But there's a lot to like, and I really think for me, talking to the guy so many times, not only is he a great human being, but I think he has a future in the major leagues. He just needs time.
No, I agree. I think when he talked about, I think I heard it from your guys' interview, him knowing and concentrating on putting the ball in the air more, I think at a more powerful basis will be, good for his game. I think there was a little bit too much infield fly ball last season. That being said, he's another guy who makes great decisions on swings inside of the zone. I mean, I think he had a 78% in zone contact rate. AA, he had an 81.4% in zone contact rate at Fort Wayne. He walked, I want to say, about 15% across all 3 levels, which is a crazy number to do. I mean, that's someone who really knows what they're looking at. So obviously you want to see a little bit more power. I think he has solid gap to gap. I mean, again, you don't just randomly post a 130 WRC plus across all 3 levels for no reason. He's a guy that has good gap to gap power. I think just as a first baseman, you want a little bit more over the wall. But no, I think from a pure standpoint of hit tool, someone I think, you saw have success in the AFL across all 3 levels. I like what he brings. He had a little bit of a higher, I think, whiff and strikeout rate at San Antonio, but that's just making the extra jump. I think the full body of work this year was, for him, excellent. I think he's someone who can be a contributor possibly down the line for San Diego. I like the raw hit tool. It's just a matter of finding a little more power and finding more power in the air, getting the ball over the fence a little bit more. But again, at the end of the AFL, I think you even saw it. He started doing that a little bit more. There was more doubles coming off that bat. It was coming off a little more authority. I saw the exit velocities continue to climb. So that was, I like Sanabria a lot. Good player.
the numbers that you're throwing out. I've got Fangraphs up here, and one thing that they lack is quality of content for minor leaguers, or quality of
Mhm.
contact. So you can't see what his hard hit rate is. All I can see is fly ball, ground ball, infield
Yeah.
fly, pull, oppo. But with a guy like that, I want to know, is he hitting the ball consistently hard? Tirso Ornelas is another guy that I want to know, is
Yeah.
it consistent hard contact, or is it, he's got the bat speed, he's got the ability to make the hard contact, but he doesn't do it consistently.
Yeah.
And
I
I feel
think,
I
no,
feel like Sanabria is somebody that has that ability to do that. We're
Mhm.
just not seeing it because he's not getting it up in the air yet.
No, I think from what I can recall from watching him last season, I don't think Sanabria was a guy that was like duck snorting the ball into the outfield. There was quality contact there. He was hitting the ball hard at a regular basis. Again, you don't just post an 820 like 820 OPS, 130 WRC plus just randomly across three different levels because you're just, oh well, I'm blooping it in here, I'm breaking my bat, and it's
Right.
dropping in center field here. It's because you know what you're looking at in the zone, you know it's you're able to identify it, and you're able to get barrel the ball. And that's what I think he does that well as a raw hit tool, just need a little bit more power. And I think, again, him being aware of that when he talks to you guys and knowing that that's an adjustment
Yeah.
he needs to make, I think speaks to, kind of the mental makeup that he has. Because sometimes guys will be resistant to it. Like they will be like, I don't want to change that. I don't want to make that tinker. I don't want to mess with myself. But him having the wherewithal and the forethought to go ahead and do that, I think, it helps him down the line for sure.
Yeah, he definitely sprays the ball over, and it kind of reminds me of what the Padres did with Jackson Merrill. When he got into Fort Wayne, they're like, dude, you need to pull the ball, pull the ball more. Stop going opposite field. And you saw that, and you saw the transition that he made in the majors this year, which is, I mean, phenomenal. But like, give those guys time to develop that stuff. And he did.
Yeah.
One of the things he did, he wants to turn, I think he had 11 home runs. He said he wants to turn that into 2025 next season. So he's going to work on not only nutrition and his body, but he's also going to work on getting the ball a little bit more in the air.
No, I definitely, again, if he's able to do that, I think his stock and his floor only continues to rise for himself.
All right, I'd like to get your scouting report on somebody who's new to the organization, Juan Nunez. The Padres picked him up in the Rule 5 draft. And so he's on the major league roster as of right now, and he may stick. I mean, we saw them do it last year. But I haven't heard a whole lot about him. It sounds like he was injured quite a bit last year, which also kind of goes along with some changes in his game.
Yeah, so the injury obviously last season limited anything he was able to really do. But when he was on the mound, I think, again, you see a guy who, if you're San Diego, you understand why you made that Rule 5 pick because the stuff is there. The fastball, 95 to 96. He can run it up to 97. I think it sits around 2,400 RPMs on that thing. And again, he struck out 31% of the batters that he faced. I want to say he had like around a 40% whiff rate. The arsenal's there. The sweeper, I would say, is probably his best pitch. Good horizontal movement on that, good depth to it, runs away from guys on the right-hand side of the batter's box, get towards that back foot on dudes on the left-hand side of the box. Definitely needs to work on a third pitch, but I do think the changeup's coming along pretty well. I like him as a profile. Again, it's just tough. It's tough to sort of be like, all right, he's a Rule 5 pick. He obviously has to stay up with the major league club. Like, do you think they're going to give him innings? I think if you're looking again from a raw tool perspective, I could see him being able to get guys out, but it's about health and it's about with him command too, because I think over the last 2 seasons, he's been north of an 11% walk rate at both stops for himself with the Orioles organization. So I liked the selection. I think usually some Rule 5 guys, you're sort of just like, there's not a lot there. But with Nunez, I do think that there is something for San Diego to develop. Obviously, it's a challenge. It's different because it's a Rule 5 selection and the parameters that come with that. But when you're getting a guy who, like I said, has a 31% K rate and a short showing a 3.22 xFIP, there's a lot to like. So I think Nunez is someone to certainly keep tabs on, especially during the spring training portion of everything when you get a chance to see him at a more full capacity with the team.
Well, you noted in your write-up here that he was starting to throw a changeup right before he got hurt.
Yeah. So I think, that will be, and I think a big thing, or Baltimore, I think is, as a group, a good organizational standpoint. But I'm of the opinion now, after seeing Ruben be able to work with guys, that getting him into that, mobile biomechanics lab they bring out to San Antonio, that him being able to work with, Niebla, that will only help that changeup continue to develop. And again, that coming along more and more already with a sweeper and a really solid fastball gives him a good baseline profile and arsenal.
the challenge is that he hasn't pitched above advanced,
No,
above high A. And so it's like
yeah,
Miguel Diaz back in the day, it's like,
Right.
how are you going to rush him up? Is it going to stunt him,
yeah.
or is he going to hit the ground running and do okay?
Yeah, I mean, again, Rule 5 picks are, over the years, like there's been Luis Torrens, there's been, obviously, as you pointed out, Miguel Diaz, these guys that have come up, and Diaz being the latest example, I feel like you just pointed out, where it's like, all right, when he's on, it's like, dang, 99 with run, guys can't hit it, but it's also like, I think he just threw 3 to the backstop there consecutive. So it's a bit of a mix one way or the other. But no, I think Nunez, like I said, he'll be an interesting guy to look at. He's got some more juice, I would say, than most.
He did drive the walk rate down this
A
last
little
season.
bit.
It's a little small sample size, but it's worth noting.
No.
So as we get down to the bottom of your list, I know that sometimes guys like to take a swing at somebody that they think is a bit of a dark horse. And you've got some interesting names down here: David Morgan, Brendan Durfee, Jack Costello. Who's somebody that you think you're high on, that you took a little bit of a risk?
I think, again, I almost dared to put him higher. And maybe it's because he was a University of San Diego Torero, but I really like Jack Costello. I thought that was a really good 10th round selection. First off, from just a baseline teammate standpoint, everything that I heard out of him out of USD is like, you won't find a better guy, you won't find a better teammate, you won't find a better leader. So that's a great profile in there. But I always felt like, and I think I put it in my write-up, is that his superpower was, again, going back to being able to identify pitches and make contact with them in the zone. At University of San Diego, during his entire career, he had an end zone contact rate over 90%. That's pretty ridiculous. And then when he comes to Lake Elsinore, again, I know he's an older guy playing against younger players, but he kept that number about, I want to say, 89%. So it didn't drop off. And not only that, but early on at USD, he flashed a little bit more power. The last couple of seasons when he was there, it didn't necessarily show up. But I feel like they made some small adjustments, and he started pulling the ball over the fence real quick when he started showing up in Lake Elsinore. I don't think that's a fluke. Again, you don't post a 141 WRC plus for no reason. I don't think you post. And again, he's walking too. When you walk around near 12%, that's a really good mark. And I think especially what showed up with him is that he turns on pitches really well. Those hands are quick. That barrel's quick on inside pitches, and he yanks balls out when he wants to. So I think he's a really intriguing guy. I know San Diego over the years, especially recently, has nailed on some of these college bats that are fast risers. I mean, Graham Pauley's obviously a guy that comes to mind, but I think Costello is someone who I'm very excited about. And again, even just think about it, I think he struck out less than 8% last year in Lake Elsinore. I know it's only 30 games, but I think he's someone who could quickly rise up through the system for sure.
I show him with a 6.6% strikeout rate, which is minuscule.
That's crazy. That's really good.
Yeah. And then playing first, third, left field, right field. He seems like somebody who's just like, doesn't care where he's going to play. As long as his name's on that lineup, he's good to go.
No, I think he's the definition of a grinder. Again, I know he's 23, but I think he's someone who he will start the season in Fort Wayne. I have to imagine. I don't imagine them being like we could see down here in Lake Elsinore again. But him having the opportunity to kind of be sandwiched probably after DeVries, maybe in between DeVries and Salas, or just after them, he'll have a lot of RBI opportunities. He'll have a lot of chances to make things happen. And knowing him, I have no reason to think that he wouldn't capitalize on it. I think he's someone to certainly keep tabs on as the season keeps moving forward.
Well, there's something to be said about the personality side of it. Yeah, I mean, you see the stats, you see the athlete, but when you see how he interacts with his teammates, I mean, we had so much fun talking to him. We could have kept going for another hour. Dude, he's just such a likable guy. So when you have somebody on your team that kind of is the glue and brings everybody together, and then you also have performance on the field, maybe he doesn't have the ceiling of a Cale Fountain, say.
Yeah.
But the guy just sprays the ball. He's a stubborn, he's a difficult out, and he does whatever you ask of him. Any coach is going to love that guy.
No, he's someone who will never give it away an at bat. He'll never do it. I mean, he's a grinder. He does everything the right way that you would want to see on a baseball field. And again, as you pointed out, it's one thing to have performance on there, but being able to be so good in between the years and being able to be someone who's a great teammate, I think just speaks to the kind of person that he is. And I think, again, he'll be someone that fast rises up the system pretty quick.
Pete Zamora talked about it. We have the right guys. We might not have the best guys, but we have the right guys on the field. And those guys are teachable, do what they're asked, and are willing to learn and do what they need to do to become, he constantly talked about my job is to make sure these guys are ready to contribute to the Padres. Like it's not about AAA. It's not about being good in AAA. It's about getting ready for when you're called, you're going to be able to contribute for the team on a playoff run. And like you said, he's one of those guys that just a glue guy, I think, early on with the leadership skills. It goes a long way being the right guy and having the right mindset. But hey, we really appreciate Clark coming on. I want to talk a little bit about, and we'll finish up here, about some guys that you didn't have on here.
Yeah.
And someone I watched.
Hold him to the fire.
Pretty much, hey, that's about as fire holding as we can do on this podcast and with minor league guys. Austin Krob was a guy who I just couldn't believe he doesn't throw hard. The fastball's in the 93, 94 maybe. He just kept getting guys out. He just, it was amazing. I'm not an evaluator, but I watched every game and it's like, okay, fastball. Then then they're on their front foot with the slider, or their butts out with the slider out of the zone. He kept getting guys out.
Yeah. I think he's someone who, if I were to do an honorable mention list on, he would be someone who would fall on that. I think just in terms of my evaluation, the stuff at its baseline doesn't snap or pop as much as I would like it to. The strikeout rate, not bad, but not as high as I maybe wanted to see it. I like the slider profile as is. The fastball velo being a little bit low. I think just for the way that I look at guys, again, he's someone who I probably would have had on an honorable mention list if I had gone down to 31 or 32. And again, for your argument making him in there, I have no problem. Like if that's the way you want to go with it, for sure. But I just think in terms of ceiling, what I'm looking for in terms of stuff, raw stuff, not exactly someone who I would level into my top 30. But again, I don't want to discredit it because there is something to be said for guys who just get dudes out. And I think that's what he has done throughout, his time in the farm system. And, I don't want to when I leave guys off the top 30, I feel bad because I'm like, they're good players, but I'm just not putting them on there for certain evaluations. Like, I don't want to make it sound like that because I think he is good and there's certainly value to him. Just in the way that I put guys through, he wasn't someone who, popped up on the top. I mean, there's a couple guys like, Ryan Oach. I didn't put him on there. He's someone who also I felt like, pretty highly on in the bullpen. There's, different names all over, but that's just kind of the way that I went with it. But again, if you wanted to stick them in there, that's totally fine. You'd have no qualms or disagreements from me. So.
What stands out to me, so I make spreadsheets. I'm an engineer, so I live by numbers, and it sounds like you kind of crunch data. Pulled up last year's 2024. I've put a table together where I get all the prospect lists I can find, and I kind of weight them and sort them and all this stuff because I'm a nerd. And at the top of this is a whole bunch of guys that aren't in the organization anymore.
Yeah.
And it just kind of stood out to me like, okay, Salas and Merrill at the top, then Lesko, Snelling, Zavala, Iriarty, Mazer, Hawley, Head, Martorella, Thorpe. All of them are gone. And it's like, I know that it struck us as the season was going by, but we're talking about so many new names right now. But there are some guys that kind of fell off a little bit. So like Brandon Valenzuela made it toward the back end of your list, but he was put like between 10 and 20 by a lot of guys a year ago. And then Lizarraga.
Yeah. Victor
left him off. I'm kind of surprised on him. It didn't pull Lizarraga out right off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think I had Lizarraga at 24. Again, I think he's someone who had a little bit of a bounce back that was needed the year prior.
My bad. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good. No, it's fine. No, I like Lizarraga. Again, he's an Imperial Beach guy. He's just down the road for me. So again, I like the curveball profile. It has good 1-7 movement on it. I think from May to the end of July, he really found a groove, like a 3.77 FIP. I want to say he had like a 27% strikeout percentage and about 10 to 12 starts. Really solid. I think last year was a big bounce back for him. And I think his fastball has, good, like a solid VAA vertical attack angle where the ball pops more in the zone. It has a good ride to it. And I think he's someone who last season treated him well. I think 2023 was a little bit of definitely a step back, but he's someone who I still have hopes for. And if he had a good season for himself this year, could certainly rise up. So, but yeah, no, there's guys that felt like Valenzuela fell down for me. I think the hope for myself in my head is that he'd always kind of pick it up, hitting offensively a little bit more. I don't want to say I've lost hope on it, but I've sort of just established in my mind that this guy's a defense guy first, which again, for catchers, nothing wrong with that. He's every account, great play caller, a stud behind the dish with throwing guys out, really bodies the ball up well. I think he's a great receiver, steals strikes to the bottom of the zone really well too, from what I watched. I just think with him, you know, I think he had a really good month in San Antonio, I want to say in July, but outside of that, it's been pretty dormant. And I was hoping when he'd get up to the PCL, and again, I know it was a small sample size, that would kind of jump up, but didn't quite figure that way that I think maybe I had hoped. So he's still on here, but he's still on here because he's a defensive guy first, which again, nothing wrong with, but
okay, and you also don't have Marcus Castagnone on there, but that's another story for another time. Another UC, another Gaucho, right? Another UC
yes.
guy. Clark. So, is there anything? So, before we wrap up here, is there anyone on this? You know, is there anyone on this list that that really that you can see could make some huge strides this year?
Yeah, I think there's a couple. I think if going through this list, I think one that jumps off right away, we haven't seen him, is Cobb Hightower. I think Cobb Hightower has kind of been a hot name. I think the more I had a chance to see him just from more game tape that I had found, and the more you sort of heard about him, I think the bat speed is there. I think his in-game power is only can continue to play up because the barrels, his ability to get the barrel to the zone is really good. Again, his bat stays in the zone a long time. Really hitterish. I don't know if he'll stay at shortstop full time. I think he may be someone who they'll obviously want to keep on the infield, but maybe move to second base. But he's someone to me who's like raw hit tool, really good. I think the in-game power is going to play higher than what his power profile currently sits at, especially as he continues to grow in. I think he'll end up being, I don't want to say he's not, I put it be anyone like, oh, they're going to be like Jackson Merrill, because that's not what it's going to be. But he was a late riser in the draft process. People didn't really know who he was because he was coming out of, North Carolina and that area. Rose late, and I think San Diego really got someone with that. I think he's another one of those dudes, kind of that we talked about with Snabria and Costello, where they just pepper the ball to all fields. That they have no problem. The hit tool's that good where they're able to go with it. And another really underrated part of it, I think a lot of people sometimes forget, this kid's really fast. I mean, we're talking about someone who runs a 6.7, 6.6 60 time. That's someone who can just absolutely fly. So I think that's about as good as it is, and I think Hightower is one of those guys. But I'm trying to think anyone else necessarily that could be, I think another guy, Cole Palpum, relief arm. I like him. I know he was injured. I was really pretty impressed with his showing in the Puerto Rican Winter League. I think the fastball slider combination is really, really good. I know it's obviously a matter of staying healthy, but I would say those two guys are two dudes who I feel like could rise up the ranks certainly more this season. Hightower being the one I expect to see a lot of. I think he'll probably jump much higher up this list by the time midseason rolls around.
That's a good catch on Paplum. I didn't realize that he pitched in Puerto Rico. That's encouraging.
No, that was because I know a lot of people thought he was being shut down, which was not the case. So, I mean, I think him being able to come back, stay healthy, have a good couple quality innings, really flash the stuff again. Again, a lot of people thought he was done for the year. So for him, the fact that he stayed healthy, went out there with net, and had some good outings, I think builds on a hopefully strong end of the season for him. I mean, start of the next season for him. So I know a lot of people I've seen conflicting reports like, oh, he's done for the year. And then when I saw he was down in Puerto Rico, I was like, oh, awesome. I get to watch him a little bit more, see what there was. Because when he was out there before he got hurt, I mean, the stuff was good. I mean, the stuff's always been good. So, I think the Padres have a plentiful number of bullpen options. And I think he's another really intriguing one to continue to kind of watch.
Well, hey, where can people find you on socials?
Yeah, so for the socials, I just Clark Fahrenthold on Twitter. That's really the only place I'm truthfully at. Don't really have anything else. Obviously, I'll be with MadFriars this season, so anytime you want to go to their website, we'll be doing some great stuff with covering prospects all throughout the season. But Clark Fahrenthold on Twitter is the place to find me. You'll be able to find my silly little tweets and my little thoughts out there if you want to go ahead and give that a follow. So I'll be over there.
Well, hey, we really appreciate you coming on, and there's going to be many more times in the future that we'll have you come on, and we'll see you soon. I really appreciate you coming on.
Hey, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was a blast to talk with you all. Like I said, I've been listening to the show for a while, so get an opportunity to kind of come on here and flesh out a little bit more of my written out thoughts was a lot of fun. So I appreciate y'all having me.
Nice.